Hi, my name is Benny Johnson. As some of you know, I've been struggling with addiction. However, I decided to change my life and went into recovery. I started this podcast 90 Days Clean, and I want to take you along in my journey. What does lie ahead of me? Let me be frank, I do not know. Will I ever drink again? I do not know. This is how Stairway to Redemption was born. It is my search for answer in a real-time process of what is going to work for me. It is then my aspiration to help you figure out what's going to work for you. It is our journey together. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Stairway to Redemption. This week, my guest is Tyler. Tyler is a published author and entrepreneur who is going to talk to us about what it is like to navigate recovery and mental illness. So, without further ado, I give you guys Tyler. Tyler, how you doing, man?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing all right. I've had better days, but I've got better days ahead of me. So I'm looking forward to those and not focusing on the past.
All right. So that leads us to our first segment then, the state of the mind address. How are you doing deeply? You said you had better days, but can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So my wife and I live in RV full time. We sold our house in May and are now traveling the United States full time in an RV. And we recently took a trip a couple of weeks ago out of town, about 4 hours from our home base, and I ran out of medicine. Didn't realize that I was running so low on medicine, ran out. So I was out for about 2 weeks and, needed that. That really made me struggle and made me kind of realize how important that medicine was again. Because I go, with going through medication, sometimes I go through periods where I'm like, oh, I'm better. I don't need the medication. But that's not the case. The medication for me is probably always going to be needed. And that's okay because it makes me feel better. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm just struggling with those, kind of recovering from that lapse of medication, but I'm back on track and slowly getting back to a good place in my mind.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And we're gonna circle back on what you just said, like the part where you feel like sometimes you don't need the medication because you feel better. Um yeah, because now I've a very question like the way also is depicted in movies and shows when somebody who is, bipolar doesn't want to take the med, but we're gonna circle back on that. But first thing first, tell us your story, Tyler. How did you fall into addiction, and how did you recover?
Yeah, that's it's a great story of resilience and the human spirit. And what happened was I had a very tough childhood. I was raised in a tough environment, went through some homelessness spots, some abuse, and I wound up leaving my mom's house. It was not my mother who was, the offender. She was probably the best advocate for me. I kept a lot of things that happened to me as a child to myself and never really told my mother and until I was older in life. But whenever I turned 18, I decided to leave her house and go out on my own. And where we live, Wilmington, North Carolina, is known for its opioid abuse and one of the worst in the country, and I fell down that rabbit hole. I was undiagnosed mentally ill, didn't know what was going on, really thought that all these intrusive thoughts, these suicidal thoughts, I thought they were all normal for everybody and didn't really try to find help except for at the end of, a pill bottle or a liquor bottle, and fell into that realm of addiction where I was relying so heavily on just to function, drinking liquor or taking opioids just to be able to function and move and every day. And it was really tough because I felt so alone. Even though I did have people there for me, it didn't feel like I did. It felt like, in my mind, because I was undiagnosed mentally ill, I was being told these thoughts by myself, that I was unworthy of love, that I didn't deserve to be here, that people didn't want me. And the drugs and the alcohol, it just amplified those thoughts, those undiagnosed mental illness thoughts, and pushed me to an edge where one day I almost committed suicide. I had taken quite a few pills and was drinking vodka was my liquor of choice, and that was the one I was sticking to. And had finished about a fifth and a bottle of Klonopin, and called my best friend Matt and told him. I said, "Buddy, I'm doing it tonight. Tonight I'm killing myself." And he tried to stop me, and I hung up the phone. He called me probably 4 or 5 more times, and I never answered. And I'm slowly fading in and out of consciousness between the liquor, between the pills, and I get a phone call from a number I don't recognize. And some reason I decided to answer that phone call. It was my best friend Matt's dad, Mr. Tommy, and he talked to me, and he asked me, he was asking me what was wrong and telling me about some of his struggles growing up and how he fought through these things alone, and how the demons, don't get easier if you continue to fight them alone. And he told me something that stuck with me ever since that day. He said, you know, "Is your wrench broken?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And his dad was a mechanic, so he spent a lot of time working in a mechanic shop. And he said, "If I was turning that wrench and it wasn't broken, my dad told me to keep on turning. You're still here. Your wrench is not broken yet, so keep on turning." And just that little affirmation reminded me that, yeah, you're right. I am still here. Despite, I probably shouldn't have been after that night, but I was there and I survived that night, and went the next day to get help from a therapist, and
Hmm.
was later diagnosed about 3 months later with bipolar disorder and anxiety. And recently, I was actually diagnosed borderline personality disorder and PTSD on top of those, because of some of my childhood trauma. And my path to recovery was one that I wanted to see my life lived out, because I realized that there were people who up there who cared about me. And once I was able to get the diagnosis, at first that diagnosis is a life-changing thing. It's like, "Oh man,
Hmm.
I'm bipolar. Am I ever going to be normal? Am I ever going to be able to live a regular life?" And then I got to thinking to myself, and I'm like, I've lived a semi-normal, semi-regular life up to this point. I've had my challenges and my struggles, but I've had a good life, with my mom and my grandparents and my brother and my best friend Matt, and all these people that I was starting to see as the medication cleared that fog that was constantly clouding me. And from
Hmm.
there, it made the journey of addiction a little bit easier to recover from, because I was able to get out of my own head and free myself from those intrusive thoughts that were driving me to the substance abuse.
Very interesting, man. Like I really that was a very informative story. Um when you talk about that fog that was clouding your mind, um I remember in a podcast you were featured on, I listened, you even said it that at first you didn't believe the doctors when they told you that you were bipolar because you thought they wanted money out of you, the insurance game and stuff. But funny enough, at that time, since you didn't take the medication yet, your mind was playing tricks on you, probably, you know? So, how does that work? At one point, what was the click or the moment that made you believe that, hey, man, I cannot trust my mind at this moment? I need something. Like, do you remember what went through your mind at that time?
Yeah, it was this feeling of I started to do a lot of research on the subject, on what bipolar disorder was, on what
Mm-hmm.
depression, anxiety, and mental illness in general was. And the things that other people were saying were happening to them that weren't normal were things that I had thought were normal for me, or that were normal for everybody else. And now I'm seeing that, maybe there is a solution. And I started reading up on the different treatments, and I tried different forms of therapy and things like that before I went on the medication because, like you said, I was afraid that it was a medication shoving it down my throat or an insurance scam trying to get as much money out of me as possible with these constant checkups. And
Hmm.
one day I just said, I've got to do something because this isn't normal. I can't live my life like this. I've got people out here who are relying on me to be here. People like my mother and like my brother and my best friend Matt and now my wife Gracie. They all want me here and need me here just as much as I need them. And I can't let them down like that. So I wanted to be able to do something to better myself and to make a difference in who I was and become even more powerful and be able to conquer my demons.
I see. That's okay. I see. That's very interesting. And when do you how does that feel? When did you get the confidence that like you're like, okay, now I can trust my mind again?
Yeah, that's a tricky part because there is still even times on medication and going to therapy that your mind still sneaks up on you and plays the tricks. You've just got to
Hmm.
it's hard to weed out those intrusive thoughts, but sometimes it comes down to knowing um, what the difference in the voice. I've named the voice in my head Kyle. Don't know why. It was just the first name that came to my mind. But his name is Kyle. And whenever he gets loud and starts talking these intrusive thoughts, I can tell a difference in his voice and my voice now because I've been able to in my mind separate these voices as two separate people. One of them is me, the other one is Kyle. And I can sit back and say, Kyle, shut up. And it's not like I'm telling myself to shut up. So I'm telling somebody
Yeah.
else, another entity, a negative entity, a demon, you may say, to leave you alone. And, it was a very hard thing it's a very hard thing to do. It's still very hard sometimes, but I've learned these coping mechanisms to be able to the split up the voices.
Yes. I wonder if even I mean I've never been diagnosed for anything, but I can somewhat relate to that part where you said like you have a demon inside you and that like you need to wrestle with those demons, and I'm wrestling with that guy every single day, and I wonder if one of my biggest fear is I'm afraid of my own self, of what I can do to people, both physically and mentally. And sometimes, like, the thoughts I have are like, I'm going to take a simple example. Like, I do martial art, right? And I do it to calm my mind, um, uh, it helps me with my mental health. But sometimes when I get into an argument with somebody or somebody gets an argument with me and doesn't respect me and start being belligerent, the intrusive thought of like, instead of being diplomatic about it, I could just knock this guy out and have that piece of immediate release, instant release, peace of mind. I need to, it creeps in my mind and I'm like, no, Benny, don't do it. And what has helped me so far not to get in trouble for a long time was consequential thinking. Play the tape forward. What's going to happen if you hit that person? If you injure them, are you going to go to jail and something? And it works. It sometimes works. Most of the time it works. But I'm still afraid that one day it's not going to be enough, you know? That some one day I'm gonna be like, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna beat that guy, and get in trouble. But what I learned in rehab and also through meditation and also through reading is that idea of compassion. Like when somebody provoked me, 90% of the time it's not about me. It's like something else is going on with them. So, knowing coming from that angle of compassion, man, is even stronger than using consequential thinking. Like, it allows me to be like, hey, man, that guy is suffering, that person who is like provoking for me for nothing is suffering. Like, I'm not gonna hit somebody who's suffering, like, and it helped me go through it. And what I'm saying, all that is like, what is it like for you when Kyle is taking over, is trying to take over? You say like you tell him to shut up, but what is like the exact process like in your mind when when Kyle is about to creep up?
Yeah, it definitely starts with kind of a feeling in my chest. I know when those intrusive thoughts are coming, I get this pit in my chest. Feels
Mm-hmm.
almost like a black hole sucking all the energy out of my body. And it makes it feel like, I'm losing a battle, and a battle with myself, with Kyle. And then the voices start to come. I start hearing things that are telling me like, you're not worthy of the love and attention that your wife has given you. You're not worthy of love and attention from your friends and family, and just demeaning stuff, telling me that I'm not going to be successful, that I'm going to fail at my businesses. And when those voices start to creep up, it's kind of like a fog, like I mentioned earlier, that settles over your mind where it gets hard to see.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really, it's hard to differentiate the real voices from the fake voices, from the bad, positive, and you've just, it's so tough to sit back sometimes and close your eyes and focus and really try to see who's saying what and what's the truth from what's fact from fiction.
I see. That's interesting. And when you are in those episodes, does it make it easier to know that you got out of it before and this also should pass?
Yes, that is something that I tell myself quite often. This too shall pass. I've made it through 100% of the bad days so far, and I don't plan to ruin that perfect record.
Yeah, that's very interesting because like that's what also I use sometimes. But man, at the moment it fucking suck. Like
Yeah.
yeah, like and not also being able to rely on any substance to make that go away. Like I'd have to ride that wave as it is, make it so much harder. But like with every single but I just I just needed to go over the hump a couple times to be like, okay, I did it without any substance. So I can do it again. And then it happens again. I can do it again. Then it happens again. I can do it again. Then after like you don't even remember when it happens, you just like I don't know. It's like the way I see it is like being at the beach and fighting the waves. Like when you go with the wave, the flow, it goes easier on your body than trying to like fight it. Like yeah. You talk also in the podcast I listened. By the way, that was great interview. With what's her name again, Amanda?
Amanda Blackwood,
Yeah. And what was the name of that podcast?
The Survivors.
The Survivors, yeah, because of your story, and you brought the importance of your support network. And I'm all about support network, and I wanted to. Can you tell our audience what your support network looks like?
Yeah, I've got a really great support network. It's a small circle. It's my
Mhm.
basically my mom, my grandmother. My grandfather passed away in April of 2023, so unfortunately he's not in that circle anymore, but he was, and I will always remember him for that. So my wife, my mother, my grandmother, my brother, my friend Matt that I mentioned earlier, and my friend
Mhm.
Taylor are some of, and my business partners at Tea with Coffee Media, Caitlin Kaylor, Kelsey Ann Lovelady, and Victoria Moxley are some of the strongest people in my group. I have a really tight knit circle, and most of them get along with each other, and they want to see each other, and they want to be around each other and be around me at the same time. So it's a little community that I've built around myself of people who just want to love and care and be passionate about me and what we're doing and the love that we're trying to give off, because ultimately that's my goal in life, is to show everybody that you're capable of being loved, that you can be loved, and that you are valuable.
Yeah, that's great. And that's I wish it was definitely more common to have that kind of goal, because with society and especially social media, everybody wants to be have money, success, cars, girls, I don't know, fame, that kind of stuff. And you brought up like the desire, like no, not the desire. You brought up the importance of that tight knit community. And I believe as a human being, we are like social creatures, and our desire to belong is sometimes too strong to our detriment. People want to be part of the most exclusive club of this part of this, for future signaling. And how how did you not fall into that? What's your let me give me a second, let me think about what is your filtering process when you try to build that community, like.
It's very tough because I am such an open person. But I've had to learn to set boundaries and
Yeah.
realize who is and who is not good for me. That started very recently. I went through my personal Facebook and cleared out about half of the people who I was friends with on Facebook, shut down my Facebook to private so that only people that I'm friends with can see my stuff, and wanted to keep certain aspects of my life private because my life had gone so public because of the nature of being an author, being a mental health advocate, being on podcasts,
Mhm.
being a business owner. There was so much going on that I was in the public eye, and I wanted to kind of take a step back because I was getting inundated with requests from people who wanted to be, personal friends and wanted to get closer and it started to become too much.
Yeah.
And while I am here for everybody, through my business pages and my author branded pages, I'd want to be here and want to listen, but I needed to separate my professional self from my personal life and be able to step back and say, okay, I need to focus on the people that are good for me, the people that help me and support me. And support doesn't always come in monetary support. That's the thing that I think a lot of people get confused on, liking my stuff on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and sharing my books and leaving reviews, because most of my close friends and family in my circle, they get free copies of my books. They pay to read all my stuff. So, just being able to get them, let them support me and see how they support me. That's how I really choose my circle, is by the way people support me, because if you're supporting me and lifting me up, we can all get higher to that next level, you know,
Mhm.
because whenever I'm at the top, I can reach down and pull you right up with me. And that's my goal, is to, we have a saying at Tea with Coffee Media that a rising tide lifts all ships. And that's truly what we believe. We try to put together the greatest fleet of ships and let the tide rise us all to that next level and support one another. Where that money, that support isn't always monetarily, sometimes it is, but it comes in free fashion too. And that's really where it comes down to me, is the support that I get for my mission and my goals and my life. Because if you can't support me now, whenever I'm struggling or whenever I'm not successful, then why should you be supporting me when I'm successful? Why should I be bringing you into my inner circle whenever you didn't believe in me whenever I was at the bottom?
Yeah. Like, oh man, that's definitely something I can relate with. And like you said, like you mentioned the word of inner circles, and that's an approach also that I did it divided I made for myself. Was I can have several circles of my own, circles of intimacy, or yeah, for lack of better word. Like, I can let the people that I meet every day, know a little bit about me. Then have a inner circle for the friend that I think are closer. Then another circle for the true friends like that. You know, that if tomorrow something were to happen to me, or I'm going, I'm not feeling that well, that I will call. And at first, it's like you said, it's like setting boundaries. But at first, I was like, oh man, I don't know. Like I thought I was treating people differently based on, I don't know how to say it. That I was being that I needed to treat everybody with the same regard when it comes to friendship and stuff, but it doesn't have to be. Um I'm still respectful to the people that I call like acquaintances that I see every day. But I have friends that like I will go to for like deeper stuff. And it allows me, making that stratification allows me to protect also myself, like emotionally, because I mean, it's all of us, I believe. We don't relate like you, the friend that you have that you name that are like your that knit circle. They're not as close to you as the people you go in your regular business every day, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's the thing, I've got some people, like you said, some people who I am acquaintances with who if I see them out in public or if I see them, post something on Facebook or whatever it may be, I'll comment, like their stuff, just say, "Hey, how you doing?" But then I've got the people who are in my inner circle, the ones who I consider family, not even friends at this point, that
Mm-hmm.
may or may not be blood related. I believe a chosen family is even more powerful than a given family. So you, there are ways to be able to still treat everybody with respect and still
Yes.
be able to, you know, have acquaintances and have friends, but not let them in on every little thing, every little detail in your life. And I think that's an important thing to realize is that there are
Mm-hmm.
some people in your life who will use that information against you, and there are people who will use that information to support you.
Yes, and I'm glad we share that view and like on this point. Funny story. That's why like I'm not. I'm I don't think I ever told that story, but I'm not a fan of celebrating my birthday or any event where I'm the center of the attention, because there's gonna be people there who are at those different level of friendships, right? Like let's say for example a wedding. Let's say it's my wedding and I invite like 100 people. Not all 100 people are my tight friend, but I cannot show during that wedding that I'm friendlier with other people, right? So that kind of s- trying to show the same it's not respect, but the same level of appreciation to everybody that knows me is is like it's so taxing on my mind, and I don't want to be rude. So that's why sometimes my boundaries are like porous, because I'm like, oh, all those people show up for me, I'm gonna treat them the same. But like it gets me on my mind. I'm become anxious. All I want to do is like to get the hell out of here. Like I don't want to be part of it. Like because if I cannot treat everybody the same, I just would rather be by myself. So, like, those are the kind of interaction. Like I said, I have a social battery, and when it depletes, I just want to be by myself. Like, yeah.
I totally understand that. Uh, the wedding thing, I've got a funny story about my wedding is we had it during the COVID era, so our venue actually shut down during COVID. So we couldn't have our wedding at our venue, so we had to have it at our in our backyard. So we
Hmm.
had a guest list of between my wife and I about 150 to 200 people that we were inviting and had to cut that down to 70 people.
Ooh.
Talk about a struggle having to explain to 75 plus people that they were no longer invited to my wedding because they weren't at that level. Yeah, that was tough and it was a very hard conversation to have. Uh,
Oh, shit.
Yeah, but I eventually went with, I invited everybody. Only people that got invited were my family members, and
Mhm.
that's what I told people. And while some people weren't blood related, like I said earlier, they're still my family, and that's what counts. So
Yeah. Oh man, I cannot imagine going through that. That's definitely a trial there. And like,
yeah.
how did you feel mentally when you had to do that?
Oh, it was rough because I felt so bad.
Yeah.
I had to uninvite people that I worked with, and they kind of got judgy and judgmental towards me about it afterwards, and I'm like, I have no choice, and that was the hard part. It wasn't like I was doing this to be malicious. I was
Yeah.
doing this because I literally had no other choice. I couldn't fit 200 people in my backyard, nor could
Mhm.
I afford a tent that fit 200 people or 200 chairs for people. And I had to cut it down to what I could afford and what I could fit. And some people, that goes back to what we were saying earlier. Some people will use that personal information only for their gain. And if they're not getting any gain for it, well, you know,
Yeah. That's definitely sad, but I thank you for sharing that story. It's definitely interesting. I'm playing it in my mind. I'm like, oh damn, that. Oh man, oh that's it. But all right, let's move on your business and your writing. You write some novels based on your personal experience. Can you elaborate on that?
yeah. So the first book I ever wrote was a novella by the name of Not Alone. It was based on true events surrounding my journey with mental illness, different phases that I went through. It also covers some of my addiction to opioids in there, and how I got hooked on those to begin with. And it really displays the vulnerability and the transparency that I try to show in my books. That you can be mentally ill, but you have support and you can succeed and you can still be successful and you can go from being at rock bottom to being at the top of the mountain. And it's possible with, the right support and the right help.
Mm-hmm.
I recently rewrote that book as a full length novel and and published it in October of 2023. My second book was a poetry collection called Coffee, Alcohol, and Heartbreak, which I actually wrote between 2012 and 2016. That was 3 years before my diagnosis with mental illness and a year after my diagnosis with mental illness. So it shows kind of the journey going from the darkest point of my life to whenever I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. That was published in 2020, and then in 2021, I released my first romance novel, The Seeds of Love, which is the Sunflower Kisses book one. It's the first of a 5 book series, and it's told from a man's point of view, but he is a mentally ill young man who gets in a long distance relationship with this girl, and it goes through the difficulties, the obstacles that he overcomes, battling his own insecurities, battling the long distance relationship aspect, and just battling everyday life with mental illness. The second book for that series is set to come out in 2024. I also released in July of 2023 Enamored Echoes Book One Potent, which is a modern day retelling of A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. And the main character in that I write, it's actually co-written by me and my one of my friends, Kelsey Ann Lovelady, and I write as Oberon, the king of the Fae, and he is schizophrenic in that book. So I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
show that even gods and deities could have mental illness, that even they weren't perfect, but you could still overcome it. Um, I've got a new book coming out in March of 2024. It is called The Principal's Principles. It is a women's historical fiction based on my grandmother's experience as the first female principal in a very rural county in the southern United States. And while it is a fictional book based on made up events, the character is very much based off of my grandmother and her strength overcoming, the adversity and the bigotry that she had to face being a female educator or female principal in the late 80s.
Oh yeah, That's a very interesting, man. You're very prolific. I like that. Is it fair to say that writing, both novel writing in general, novel or poetry, is like a catharsis for your mental health?
Yes, absolutely. I love writing. People ask me, one thing I get asked a lot is how do you manage writing your books, your blogs? I have a podcast and two businesses. How do you manage all that? And I'm like, it's easy when I love all of it because I see it more of a hobby than a job. I don't see my writing as a job anymore. I see it as a hobby that I get to do and have fun with, and it's a release, and I get to just sit down at the computer and let my fingers type away and explore this new world that I'm developing. With blogs, I get to do this research and learn new things. I'm a big proponent of education and learning and constant continuing education. And being able to, do these blog posts, do these podcasts where I'm learning new things, it's an amazing experience. And I think it helps my mental health so much.
Yes, I would definitely love to read some of your writing and your books. Because um, I think the accuracy of what somebody who suffer from mental illness go through will be higher if the book is, or whatever piece of media is written by somebody with who experienced it firsthand. That's why to circle back to the beginning of the interview when I was talking about like the depiction of mental illness in some shows. We recently, I don't know if you know the Ozarks, right? That show, the Ozarks on Netflix, or like even Homeland with what's her name again? I forgot. I'm gonna remember her name, but the main character of Homeland, she suffered from bipolar. She's a bipolar. And do you remember that show, Homeland?
I do not.
Oh, okay, so like it's basically a CIA analyst who suffer from bipolar, and for some reason, when she doesn't take her meds, all of a sudden she can piece things together because she thinks really outside of the box. But it takes her into like a manic state where like she's even destructive to herself, but she can piece together like any type of like terrorist cell or like anything that like somebody who it takes her mind to another place, as if she was like all of a sudden, how like some people suffering from autism can be really smart and solve like say like so many numbers after pi, or like solve some like really deep because of the way of thinking, the thought process. The way the show depicted it was as if like she had a superpower if when she was not on her meds, and when she was on her meds she was just a regular person. And you have a bunch of shows that depict it like that. So my question is like, what do you think of the depiction of mental illness in shows? And yeah.
There's definitely a long way to go.
Yeah,
Because I think that is a very harmful way of thinking because it almost encourages people not to take their medication because if they feel like if they
exactly.
don't, then they're going to have these superpowers. And
Yeah,
while yes, if you don't take your medication, you could go into a manic state, but that's not a good thing because I've been in manic states before where I have completely, with a manic state, you feel like you're on top of the world. You feel like you're invincible, you can't be stopped, you're the most creative. I love writing whenever I'm in a manic state, but I know that I'm going to tear myself down and it's not worth, that those extra 200 or 300 words that I might be able to put down to tear myself down because you go on to sprees where you do feel like you can do anything and you start taking on too many tasks at work or too many projects and you start spending too much money and making too many obligations that you can't keep, and it really destroys you as a person because you feel like you're letting everybody down once you go back into a depressive stage, or once you get out of that manic stage and you start seeing, oh wow, I'm supposed to be doing this, this, and this, and now I don't have, the energy or the motivation to do it. And even, manic stages don't last forever. And that's the thing that I think people need to understand, is just because you don't take your medicine doesn't mean you're going to be in a manic state. It could mean that you're in a depressive state, and a depressive state, is one of the worst things that can happen to somebody with bipolar disorder, because then they're stuck thinking with their own thoughts of suicide and relapsing and all kinds of things, where their mind takes control over their body. And if you're not on that medication to help control and lift that fog and help to tell the difference between Kyle's voice and your voice, then you know what's going to protect you from the demons.
Yes, yes, I see. That's true. So, in your opinion, what would be a good depiction of, if you were to create a show, or like depicting mental illness? Like, do you have any favorite show out there that you like, that you think are like the most accurate?
I wouldn't say a show necessarily that I can think of,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, Silver Lining,
Playbook?
yes, Silver
Yeah.
Lining Playbook. That is probably one of the best representations of bipolar disorder that I've ever seen. I love that movie.
Yeah, that one is great. I really liked it too. I need to watch it again because it's been a while. And I remember the movie, but I don't remember the feel of it. So I need to watch it again. Definitely. But yeah, like now I heard in one of your podcasts, the other podcast where you were like the suffering one, that you still drink, but like craft beers. You are into craft beers. And for some people, when they call themselves sober, it's sober of everything. Me personally, I have no qualm with calling yourself sober if your addiction were just drugs or opiates. But yeah, there's a certain funny point that you said when we talked, that like you even sober from liquor. And to me, I didn't make the distinction really between liquor and beer, because they both get you drunk. But like, how does that work for you? What's the distinction there?
So with liquor, I had a bad habit of going overboard, drinking to get
Mm-hmm.
drunk. With craft beer, I enjoy the flavor profiles. I enjoy
Mm-hmm.
the conversations about how they were made. Because if you go to a lot of craft breweries and sit down with the hop master or the bartender, whoever it may be, they'll explain to you what the process for making that beer was like, or what they included. Some breweries have included Cocoa Puffs
No
in their
way.
brew. Yes, I've had a Cocoa Puffs stout, and I
Yeah.
mean that it's things like that. They're just so interesting, so intricate. I don't drink them to get drunk. I don't drink beer to get drunk. I drink it for the flavor profile.
Yes. So the way I see it is a little bit like a sommelier that tastes the wine for the wine profile, except
Right.
for beers. Yeah. And how did you was that always the case when you were like getting yourself together sober, or were you like sober for a while and then you were like, huh, let me try craft beers? How did you stop how did you stop drinking to get drunk and fall into that hobby of yours?
I stayed sober for about 3 years from everything. Didn't
Mm-hmm.
touch any kind of opioid, no kind of liquor, alcohol, beer, nothing. And that was my time to get myself together, to learn my limits, to better understand why I was drinking to get drunk, why I was taking pills to get high. And once I was able to kind of come to terms with myself and accept it, I still didn't want to drink that I didn't have this desire, this craving to drink, but a buddy of mine was big into the craft beer scene whenever it first came into our small town of Wilmington, North Carolina. And I would go out with him and just sit at the bar. I would drink water and he would, drink a craft beer. And I went to this place called Edward Teach Brewery in Wilmington, North Carolina, and they had this beer on tap called Teach's Peaches. And I'm a big peach lover. I love all peach drinks, peach flavored candy, whatever it is, love peaches. So I was like, I'll give it a shot. So, I tasted one. I was like, man, this is not like the beer that I remember from college because I hated beer in college. It
Yeah.
wasn't something that tasted good to me, and I hated the way it was. So I never really drank that much in college of beer. And so I tasted it and I was like, man, this is great. And I started talking to my buddy about it. He was explaining to me the different types of craft beer and the different processes that they use. And then I got to talking to the hop master or the brew master and the bartender and the owner of the brewery. And I just fell in love with this whole world, the science behind craft beer and the
Mhm.
community of craft beer. I've met a lot of great people through craft beer, just going to breweries and sitting down and, looking over and saying, hey, what are you having? Here's what I'm having. It's really good. And then we'll just spark up a conversation. And, you know, I, I don't go overboard. Like I said, I like it because of the flavor profile. I like it because of the community that you can have through it,
Mhm.
the people that you meet, and just the atmosphere of breweries are so fun. My wife and I, like I said earlier, we travel full time and we try to find craft breweries that also serve craft coffee because she's a big coffee aficionado and I'm a big coffee aficionado. So
Oh,
now,
same here, bro. Guilty as
yes,
charged. Yeah, guilty as
yes.
charged. Yeah. Yeah, keep going. Sorry, I did. Yeah.
No, no, you're fine. Yeah, so we try to find those combos and,
Mm-hmm.
make the best of both worlds, but I don't overdo it. I think, especially I don't really drink during the week at all. Unless we go out to a brewery specifically for dinner one night, I might have one or two. But during the week I try to limit my alcohol consumption to zero. And on the weekends, that's when I try to go out and enjoy a beer here and there. But it's a fine line about
Mm-hmm.
overindulgence and making sure that you don't cross that line and get back into old habits because once you start to get back into those old habits, it's hard to break them again. But I think staying away from liquor has been my biggest saving grace because I've never had, and even smelling liquor now makes me sick to my stomach, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Like I bet it triggers bad memories whenever you have that smell and stuff.
Yes.
But I definitely especially when you say like aficionado, like now I can see how, traveling the country to try different roasts, coffee roasts and stuff will definitely be my thing. Um, but like now this raises this question. How do you handle yourself, or what's your state of mind when while going on a brewery or drinking, you're surrounded by people who are not there for the appreciation of what it is, but are there to get shit faced. And sorry, but like in our current media culture, I mean, the super curiosity movement is raising, the awareness is raising, but shit faced culture is still huge. So how you navigate that?
Yeah, being having my wanting to get shit faced phase back in college really helped me to realize that that's not what I wanted to do. And now being in a position to where I have a wife, I have dogs that I have to take care of, I have a family, I have to be able to function. I have a business that, two businesses that working hours never really end. I do the job whenever it comes necessary. So I can't get drunk because I have to be able to function at all times. So being able to remind myself that, while there are still people out there like the college students who are going out there
Mm-hmm.
getting shit faced, I'm not that person anymore. And, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with wanting to go out and do that, but there are better things to do in your life than than to get drunk 24/7. And, if if it's a phase you're going through in college, all I can say is, let it be a phase, but don't let it be your life, because it can definitely get out of hand. And just know your limits. It's not worth waking up every day with a damn hangover and your head
Yeah.
pounding and feeling like you're gonna throw up. Like, I'm over that. That's for the birds.
Yeah, like I definitely, and like, you sound so secure right now, and that's definitely what um I can share that mental state where, like, you know, man, I went to hell and back, man. So like the idea of peer pressure or getting shit faced and stuff doesn't even phase me, man. When people are like, "Oh, you don't drink, not even one," I'm like, man, I know so much more now that, like, peer pressure is a joke. Like you cannot shake me because I know exactly where it's going to put me, and I'm not there trying to prove anything to. And to go back to that circle of, I don't need that desire to. I don't need to belong that bad that I will do things to compromise my core self. Um. But yeah. All right, I think we are reaching the end of this interview. Thank you, Tyler, a lot. So let's finish with that. The floor is yours. What would you like to talk about or ask? Any question? Like, you know.
I just want to say, if there's anybody out there who's struggling, I mentioned it on this podcast already, but find me on any social media platform that I'm on. I'm at Tyler Witkowski on pretty much everything, and I will be there for you to listen to talk to cry with, or to yell at. Whatever you need, I am here for you. Don't feel like you're alone. There is somebody out there who's willing to listen, because it's like I tell all my friends, I would much rather stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning listening to you tell me about your problems than have to read them on a suicide note the next morning. And I mean that for every single person in this world, because every single human being who loves deserves to be loved.
Damn, that's deep. Like, I really like that part. Yeah, man. Okay. All right. So speaking of social media and stuff, guys, I'm gonna add the link and the description to all your social handles, and so people can find you. All right, guys. I will see you for the conclusion. Bye. All right. This concludes episode 46 of Stairway to Redemption. Big thank you to Tyler for being my guest in this episode on more centered toward like mental health and addiction. I was surprised during this interview how much I did relate and identify to um, what Tyler was saying, like especially the demon part and not the voices met, but like the almost the alter ego that we need to quiet down when we're going through to the rush of of life and stuff. It's funny, like I would never have thought that I will identify so much with everything that he said. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, I will see you next week. Bye.